What's happening, everyone? Look, it's Jeff. Just wanted to put a little header in your head of this next episode. This next episode coming up on the Second Chance podcast. It's going to be with a friend of mine. His name's Chris Shelton, and he was former military, former law enforcement, and just has a really amazing story of just trying to become a better parent. Just things that he's done. His second chance, he feels very strongly, is just being able to, because he had kids at a really young age, and he was doing shift work and all those things, and then separation. So the cool part you'll hear from Chris is how he um, just how he really buckled down on just trying to be the absolute best dad that he can be. So, with that said, you're probably going to have someone who's in that young age that is looking for some guidance and looking for a little inspiration. So, if you're not following along, make sure you follow along with our podcast and then share this episode with them. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Let me know what you think, and I look forward to seeing everybody on the other side. Enjoy the episode. All right, team, welcome back to the Second Chance podcast. Today, I got a special guest, someone who I have worked alongside over the years. He and I were basically almost co-workers, even though he was in a different department. But I want to welcome Chris Shelton to the Second Chance podcast, and we're just going to dive into some cool things that he wanted to share with the world, just about his perspective. He's a former military veteran, or he is a current military veteran, but he's a former military member, former law enforcement. He segued into the private sector now. So, man, I am excited just to help you get your story out and tell some of the cool things. You're a dad of many kids, one of them being a 6-month-old daughter now that I think, if I remember correctly, this is your first girl. And if I remember correctly, your boys are close to grown now, right?
Yes, sir. Oldest one will turn 18 later this year.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to kind of tell you as we were warming up, and just when you like reached out and said, "Hey, man, I want to jump on with you," I was thinking like, all right, what was my first Chris Shelton? What was my first? All right, let's see here. And I just remembered the buzz being like the town had hired this military guy, and he was coming into that he was coming into our law enforcement circles there locally where we worked at, and you were one of the first officers in rural law enforcement that I remember, because I got to travel then. But you had a sleeve tattoo. You had some visible tattoos, and I was thinking about cool things I felt like that were credited to you. Was like you kind of eased the arm tattoo and visible tattoo generation into rural law enforcement, because but until I met you, you were the only one. That was a no for the old school sheriff that I had worked for and different stuff. But I remember that, and you know how it is sometimes when you're like I was doing plainclothes stuff and undercover stuff, so I'd get to be around the hear all the chatter sometimes because folks didn't know who, but you would be referred to as, "Are you talking about the one with the tattoos? You're talking about the one with the tattoos?" So I remember that. I remember your buzz, but you got a story that's way before that even I and we probably shared bits and pieces, but take me back, man. How did you there's a point in time when you're graduating high school and you end up in the military. What did that look like for you?
I actually knew very early on that the military was the direction that I was going to go in, probably at least as early as freshman year of high school, probably earlier than that, really. Um, so that was always my plan, and actually signed my paperwork to join the delayed entry program for the Marine Corps 2 weeks after my 17th birthday. Went active duty while I was still 17 after graduation.
What year are we in right now, Chris?
2003.
So 2003, you're 18-year-old Chris it's 18 so 2003. All right, just trying to get my time. So we're post 9/11. There's a conflict going on. Was that kind of your inspiration, or was you like, what did that look like for you?
I mean, it was a little extra motivation, but it didn't change anything for me. That was already my plan prior to.
That's cool.
Uh, it was just a little more fuel to the fire. But I went active duty. immediately after graduation. I was still 17 years old. Um, I came out of the military at the age of 21 and almost immediately went into law enforcement. I mean, basically that very next month, I went into law enforcement. It was just the most natural, and a lot of guys will tell you this. If um, I wasn't very intelligent with my choices, and that's kind of a we can go into that a little further for years and years. But
That was like,
you know, when I joined the military, I had high test scores and stuff, but I just from watching movies when I was a kid and all this stuff, I wanted to go into infantry. That's regardless of how I was steered or whatever, I wanted to go into infantry. That's what I did. So there's not a lot of different skills that you're not learning how to do air traffic control or anything.
so hang
That
on a second. Let's pause there. So we go in the Army, right? Are we Army Marines?
Marine Corps.
All right,
Yeah.
so we're in the Marines. You're 2003, and then you're coming out as an infantryman. Are you deploying or are you stateside?
I was moving around a little bit.
Yep.
It's so, but that long story short, when I came out of the military, I was preparing to come out. I didn't have a lot of skills or that applied to you know uh, the private sector as far as skilled trades. I
So,
wasn't a welder or anything like that.
all right,
So
let me ask you here. All right, so infantryman, when you look at that, and so we're going from high school to military. So your first in your mind, your first second chance. So we're going to say is your segue from military into law enforcement. But during your time there, had you got promoted or anything along those lines, or did you start as an infantryman and finish as an infantryman?
that's basically how it went for me. Yeah, I mean uh, nothing crazy that I know from that time. Um, Learned a lot and was ready to move on. Um,
Yeah. And so I mean that's kind of like you say. So did you get there and was you finally like, yeah, this ain't for me? Do you miss home?
no,
Um, I checked the box on this and I'm ready to get on to something else.
I had I had gotten married very young during that time, and that kind of pulled me back home, and that wasn't I don't see that as a bad thing by any
Yeah,
stretch.
yeah.
But that had some impact on my decisions, and
I think you hit me right there too when you said it because I remember you were one of the youngest. I was young. I was 24, but you were. There was a couple guys that came on later, but I was one of the youngest. Right? I think I may have been in 24 was one of Quint's youngest folks that he had put out there. But then here you come along right behind me, right? As in just a little, 5 or 6 year period, but still though you come in as 21-year old. But here's what I'll tell
mhm.
you, man, and I spent a little time there in myself, and you know this. I mean, you've had many a private conversation, but I think probably somewhere along the lines, your skill set immediately told you, or your adaptability puts you over in law enforcement because of just typical service, and you're kind of taking off one hat and putting on the other. You're doing patrol work versus infantryman work, and they're both kind of sound like they're very task oriented. Go do the job, go here, go there, type thing. Is that kind of like what your military? Because I don't know, I've never been in the military. Does
Yeah,
that look like over
I
there?
think that's that's a lot of what it was, and the structure. The structure's a big thing too.
Yeah.
Um, it just the military to law enforcement seems very very natural for a lot of guys, even though they are two different worlds, but it just fits
Yeah,
for a lot
yeah,
of
the
people.
structure. I think the structure probably leans into the bigger thing, where it's just rank and
Yeah,
file, chain of command. Everybody's working working toward a common goal of, but you're also that's very daily goal. But then you're responsive, and I think that's probably when I talk to my military friends, is especially guys that worked in units, is yeah, there was always responsive, and that's the same thing with us. When a dispatcher would give you a call or something like that, you're responsive. I did a whole lot better when I had direction or a goal looking back on it, and it may have been just a case to work, right? But the case had to get solved. In the grand scheme of things, I was like a German Shepherd. If you didn't give me work to do, I was going to go dig a hole somewhere. And
yeah,
I just yeah, so I totally get. I think it comes from us just in when you look at that, it's just our inexperience. And sometime what I was going to ask you too is like how were you with authority in your military leadership during this time? Was because you got this 18 to 20-ish, 21-year-old Chris, are you receptive to the mentors? Are you receptive to folks coming in, plugging in with you?
As far as leadership goes, I was very receptive to that. I was that kid that when I was a senior in high school, I didn't have a lot of discipline, and 6 months later, I come home and wonder where it's all at
Yeah,
from everyone else. It just that really just got driven into me as soon as I went in the military. Um, so I've always been very receptive to leadership for the most part.
yeah, yeah. And there was a point in time where it's easy to take that military skill, and you're exiting out, new wife, probably if I remember correctly, you maybe have one or two kids at this point in time too. So you're not only a kid, right? Let's face facts, right? You're like me. You were I shared the story with some folks of I was in EMS at 15, literally doing EMT type work, but couldn't drive a car. And I go back to that sometimes as saying as great at people and at places it put me, and I go, was it good for my mental health as a 15-year-old? But I had a lot of great people around me that I look back on it too. But same thing for you is you're here you are, you come out very jobs of high responsibility in military, and then new dad and all those things, and then here we go being a patrolman in a small town. So what was that experience like when you come out of the military, and then did you move into the area that you patrolled in, or was you from this area?
From the same area. Yeah. So it
Yeah.
was it was
You
just
come
like
home.
coming home. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So you come home, get hired as a police officer, and then you just go to work doing your patrol stuff, right?
Yep.
Um, Easy to move skill set from at this point in time, moving skill set over from military into law enforcement. Pretty simple. Cool.
Yeah.
Um, so that's really cool, man. I would really like to just because you're it's a really cool period of your life of, and I think what you speak to sometimes is there's a dad. How old are you now?
I'll be 39 here in
Yeah,
a couple months.
well,
Yeah.
I thought we were there's a little bit of distance, but enough to where we listen to the same music at some point in time. That's what I told somebody the other day. I would you're speaking to there's thousands of kids out there right now who's in your situation, man, and I think it happens more often than we think of. A lot of uncertainty, and the military seems like good options. And what did your real quick before we move on? What did your why did you know in ninth grade that the military was for you?
Honestly, I think it was just uh, the typical watching movies like Platoon and Full Metal Jacket and all these. Just watching the movies as a kid, that's just what I thought was the cool thing to do.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. Now I grew up. I did the same. My life just took me in different paths to where it never put me in a recruiter's office, right? So it's. But I totally get that. I had shared with a friend of mine. He was talking about incidents, and I was like, he was talking about like a Ruby Ridge and Waco and that timeline. And I was like, Hollywood kind of, Hollywood glorified that old Vietnam vet there for many years. There was a lot of
yeah,
movies that was pushed out about that era and with those how those guys are living. So there's a little bit of preconceived notions toward those too. But you had told me that every single day feels like a second chance to you. Can you elaborate on this perspective and how it influences your daily life and decisions?
um, I've like I kind of touched on, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, and I will always continue to. Uh, and unfortunately, it took me longer than maybe it should have to learn from some of those mistakes and how to correct those things. But having that growth and maturing in that way has has uh, made me appreciate the ways that I can better myself every single day. And the most important ways that matters to me is that your forms is as a husband and a father. Um, those are priorities above everything else. So I just appreciate the smallest little details now. I've also had to learn the hard way, a lot of hard ways, that because of the stages I was at in life at such a young age, with um, the careers that I chose, the time away from home, the ages, my age and the age of my kids. Um, I missed a lot of things. I didn't appreciate a lot of things when they were much younger, as far as my boys, because I have the three sons that are all teenagers now. They're all in high school. They're all getting ready to graduate. Basically, starting next year, I'll have 3 consecutive years of high school graduations. Um, but when they were young, I wasn't as involved as I should have been. Don't get me wrong. I was, it's not like I was just away for weeks and months at a time. I just, up here, I wasn't always as involved as I should have been, or wasn't prioritizing. Um,
If you made time, if you made time to, now that you're on a different schedule, have you really plugged in with that, or what's that look
oh,
like for
absolutely. Yeah. It's, um, it's, I spent a lot of time, I felt like playing catch up,
you?
trying to make up for lost time and mistakes that I made. Uh, their mother and I are no longer together, and haven't been for several years, but we've also developed a friendship, and do the best that we can as parents, even though we're not together.
That's good.
Um, so a lot of they were always with me being away a lot. They were more attached to mom, and I understand that. So that caused me some more issues, or it really caused me to notice more issues when we split. As far as the attachment that they had to mom and the attachment they didn't have as much to me. I've always been dad, um, and always kind of done some of the dad things with them, but the relationship was very different. Um, so I spent a lot of time, number one, realizing that, and then two, having to put in the effort to try to change it, and change where my priorities lie. And
How,
every day now is a chance to continue to do that.
that's how you feel about it. How you feel about it. Yeah, what if you had to give yourself a grade on effort on plugging in with your kids right now? What would it be? Would it be, you tell me?
Oh, my opinion was is that it's an A.
A plus.
I would
Yeah,
like to think that,
yeah.
but I'm never going to sit here and tell you that I do it absolutely perfectly either.
No,
Um,
Chris, I'll share with you. My son's 14, and I sat down with him and his sister, who's 12, to tell them, I don't know what I'm doing. You guys don't know this, but you're raising me. And that's me having kids way freaking later in life. My son will graduate in 4 or 5 years, but these kids are coming along when you are still trying to figure out yourself, man.
yeah,
Um, and I don't think it's ever too late to, and for anyone who's listening to this, I think knowing Chris, and things that we will talk about in future episodes, but I don't think you're ever going to find an opportunity for anyone who says that it was too late. I just didn't try it. No, it's never too late, man. If you're
yeah,
estranged with your kids and you're not, if you feel like you aren't getting it done or whatever, go talk to them. And I think you hit it on the head. I've shared this with a lot of people is, um, my kids, when I get stuck in this what I'm trying to do in speaking, and because I get scared of how these stories are going to affect them. I get when this episode goes out and my kids hear some of these little tidbits of things that they don't know about me. I get nervous about it, but I go talk to them. I published some content. You'll see it out there on just my grandfather got arrested for DUI on a tractor in one town over, when I was a kid, and going on to work. I went on to work with the guys that arrested him. And I brought it up in a training or something other one day. And the guy was in the room. He's like, "That was me. I arrested him." You know. But I went to them, Chris. I went to them and said, "Here's a post. I'm getting ready to put this up. This is, and so I told the story. So a lot of our times, man, is I go to them first, and I'm like, y'all realize this, y'all raising me. Um, but that's really good that you just didn't say, well, it's too late. And
No, I think honestly, as much as I wish I had done better from day one, um, the one blessing that I have is that I have become more introspective and matured in these ways. At the same time that they're teenagers and they're in these most transformative years of their life. So I'm hitting it when it matters most, I think, and I think I'm able to maybe reach out to them a little more because I have went through the times that I have in when they're in these years of their lives.
did you get to listen to Seth's episode?
I
This,
did. Yep.
all right, Seth talks about it. It's spot on. If you haven't heard it, go back to, I think it's the second one that's up right now. He talks about just not knowing how to love because all the crap he dealt with and all the shit he dealt with as a kid, he just didn't know how to love. And then here comes kids into the picture. He doesn't know how to be a dad either, and he is right there, just on this struggle bus trying to figure it out. And just his perspectives on that are just, it's really cool of how we all, um, same thing I shared with him, and you heard this of how we all planted new trees, new family trees of whatever that. And my kids are the first branches, and his is the same thing of just getting away from some of the negative stuff. That's what you were able to do, Dave. So you got to,
Right.
um, it is there will probably be a time, and let's imagine a conversation with your kids sitting around on a podcast or having a beer with their friends, and we're like, yeah, there was a point in time my dad wasn't around a lot, but man, then he was, right, and
Yeah.
that's I think that's how that conversation will go at some time. You got to be proud of that, dude. That's a big deal. One thing I was going to ask for perspective, military Chris, police Chris, where's your mom and dad? Are they both together? Are they in the picture? And
Uh, I mean, mom and dad were both in the picture. They divorced when I was young, but I don't think it didn't. I can't claim any negative impact that it had on my childhood more so than it would have anyone else's. There's really nothing negative that I can say about my childhood.
yeah,
Um,
just I was curious whether how they
yeah,
influenced you, or whether they were saying go or stay, or sometimes Chris, the uncertainty of, um, I've learned this in just my conversations with, as I started self destructing in that '06 to, I mean, on into '08, '09 ish, of just trying to really figure me out, was just how much that childhood stuff really lingers sometimes. And it's unbeknownst to us because you deal with it. You learn to deal with it, you compartmentalize it and some of the other stuff, and then it comes back storming if we haven't dealt with it appropriately. And so sometimes split home stuff can lead to just an uncertainty of, and then shift work is good because you have change and all sorts of stuff that you're used to in that divorce lifestyle. Not to say that that's what it was for you, but just
yeah,
that's good, man. It's good that your folks figured out a way that it didn't affect you negatively, right?
yeah.
Um, Man, that's so good. I just really like the way that you put that with your kids, and because I know your kids, right? I've been around your kids. It's been years, but I just know that um, how cool that's got to be for them, for you to find this perspective. So,
When
go ahead.
I think another thing that I had to change a lot too to hit on is I was always from the lifestyle that I had begun living as a young adult, I was an absolute disciplinarian with my kids when they were younger. And that was something that I had to really learn how to balance when I'm trying to reach out and develop this relationship with them. Um, Maintaining, some discipline, but also showing them another side of me. And that's one thing that I've gotten a lot better about, over the last few years is they know where I stand, but also bringing myself down sometimes and reminding myself, hey, I was a kid, and to be quite honest, I made a hell of a lot more mistakes than they have,
Yeah,
even at the ages that they are. So reminding myself of that and just reaching out instead of just, being just being an absolute disciplinarian 100% all the time
Yeah.
to bring myself down and make a connection and just level with them, you know.
You're right. I was fortunate to have kids later in life to where critical thinking I had learned that, and I had learned that they're people. As much as we want to say they're our kids, they're their own individual person with their own personality. Now, my daughter may act just like me, and you have to be careful with that. But they both have their own things. I had a conversation with them the other day, Chris, and they had done something, and they knew they were kind of in some trouble. And I was like, listen, let me explain something to y'all. I'm trying to help y'all. I'm trying to prepare you for a lot of things that's going to come out in the world. And I said, here, how many? Raise your hand in this room if you've ever been a dad before. And so we're all just looking at each other awkwardly, and I'm like, all right, raise your hand if you got to be a kid. And we all raised our hands up. I'm gonna go, this is my first time being a dad, y'all. And I'm trying to figure this out. And unfortunately, you guys didn't come with a manual. And what we can't figure out, we're going to have to figure out together. And we're going to do this the right way. And we're going to come together. And I just took that approach, man, of just what can they, instead of me figuring out how much I can teach them, how much they can teach me. And it has paid off twofold, just how I approach my conversation. Just how I approach my conversation with them, because I don't want to be that. You better just buy the numbers, and this is the way the Robertson household runs. And I know I don't want to do
Right.
that.
No, it makes a big difference. That's just like you're talking about how I've come to be, where I appreciate an opportunity to show or teach my kids where I'm capable of making mistakes,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
and 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 the real advantage that comes from that is the ability to show them how I'm going to handle it. Number
yeah,
one, being able to admit it and own up to it, but two, to show them how I can navigate through that and correct it.
yeah, yeah. I think owning like you said, or you may put it in a note or something, just owning your own crap sometimes is a big deal with your kids. And I've gone to them, and I've talked to them about work when they were itty bitty. I had a thing where my son was like, "Dad, what's wrong?" And I was like, I just I had some stuff going at work. The lady I left, she was upset because I had to tell her, and he's like, Dad, just go back and talk to her. You always talk to me when I've done something little that frustrates you. Go back and talk to her. It'll all be okay. So I was like, holy crap. So I take a lot of stuff to them sometimes. Like you said, is owning your crap, owning your mistakes, sharing. And I try to tell them the why. Like if um, with me, sometimes it's family and some of the interactions that I try to keep them from having, just because I don't want the negative side of like what I had to deal with growing up. Yeah, I'll share this in a separate thing, but there's a point in time when I am we had my mom had or my grandfather had like showed his butt, did a bunch of crazy stuff, set my mom's car on fire, and we kind of went into hiding. And we got a phone call. He shot my aunt, right? And they were like, "Oh, it's just the way it was. He was drinking at night." And I said, "No, they enabled a lot of negative behaviors." And I just like my kids ain't gonna be around that type of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, good job on that, man. You need to take a moment and really. It's the first time like you and I've talked in quite a while, and I'm glad you shared that with me, man. I think it's a good focal point for parents that are out there that have those young kids, or parents. There's people out there now that are afraid to go talk to their kids because of the dumb stuff they've done, man. And hopefully between mine and your conversation of like it's never too late, man. Just go own it, go see your kids and figure it
Yeah.
out.
And that doesn't even mean that I have went to them and explained to them every mistake that I've made in my life, because that's not the case. But they see how I operate now. I think another great benefit that comes from it is them seeing the humility that I have with being able to own up to my mistakes and to be free with you know free with trying to pass that lesson on to them.
Yeah. That's a question that you had that we and you had talked about, was that the importance of owning your actions and being careful where you aim your focus. What do you when you aim your focus? What are you talking about there? What is that? What's coming to mind when you're like thinking about where you where you got to be careful aiming your focus?
Um, Really, one of the biggest things that I needed to do in my life was figure out what the priorities were and actually focus on those properly. Reorganize everything, focus on my family, myself, our health, and everything else is secondary to that. Um, I don't, as far as aiming that focus, I don't like to waste a lot of my bandwidth on things that have zero impact on my family, or us having a good day or any. My mindset has changed a lot. It's evolved over the last few years where I've been one of those people at times where I was just always finding stuff to be mad about.
Yeah.
Um, and it could be simple. It could be stuff on the news to, you know, any you name it, any little thing. Because you and I both know those people that as great as they are going to find things to be pissed off about every single day. And I
Yeah.
just finally got to a point where I said, I control that. And I don't want that anymore. That is, of zero benefit to me. It wastes my time and energy. Um, so I watch where I aim that focus. I try my best to not get sucked into any of that negative stuff. I adjust my mindset based on I try to question everything and not just assume everything's a negative. I try to find a positive in things. Um, it's so many people I think waste a tremendous amount of energy just with negativity for absolutely zero reason. There's no benefit that comes out of it at all. And it's I was having a conversation with somebody actually, in the last couple of weeks about that, about using their time and energy as if it's a currency that is limitless and is in a checking account, and not to just be purging all of this time and energy, on waste, um, to to actually have some value with the time and energy that you have. Maintain a positive mindset as much as you possibly can. None of us are capable of doing it at an absolute 100% of the time. We're still, I'm probably going to get upset with someone driving home today, but it's that constant effort because you're always keeping it top of mind here, um, not to get sucked into that. So it's just, if it isn't, having some terrible impact on my family, it ain't dragging me down. I don't have any chains. Um, and it is such a tremendous feeling to get to that point where up here you can control it in that way.
Yeah, that's that cope with what you can control thing. And I think as police officers, we become control freaks pretty easily because it's kind of what you do is you're always solving the world's problems, and but I became very inept at solving my own, and I needed that outside influence that ultimately came along. But you're spot on. I don't watch the news. I'll scroll and catch whatever's on the scroll or whatever. I tell you something that was critical to me, and you talk about your driving, is I don't listen to aggressive music unless I'm working out or we're getting ready to play
Yeah,
ball or something other. But it is not. I just learned that once I stepped away from aggressive music and driving and waking up and in my daily life, it really helped me a lot just because I was operating on 10.5 all the time, man. The rest of the world's on 6. And I'm keyed up just because of what I'm listening to.
yeah.
That's really good. You kind of capped our whole conversation, and I think if I remember correctly, you're between all of those. You're in a leadership role now, right?
A
Is
little
a
bit. Yep.
little bit of, yeah. That's so you got some you've took on a little bit of, you got some directs or you got some policy that you're pushing and things like that. So I just remember there was a point in time when I dumped a lot of just books and different things and reading podcasts, and hey, these are things that's helped me along the way to kind of help get my ship stirring in the right direction. But that's good, man. Um, your schedule's better these days, and it seems like you're more of all daylight where you're at home at night.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, big deal for anybody in public safety that does shift work and overnight work is it's that's I heard it said one time. There's no balance with that. You're either at work or you're at home, and there's no let's balance that out. So man, I tell you, this is a really good parenting conversation just for and like myself to where you and I both where we felt like we started off on that wrong foot or that wrong path and you corrected it. And you really got to give yourself a lot of credit for recognizing that and realizing that it was never too late to go in and make a difference in your boys. And um, especially in your boy's life, your daughter's going to reap all the benefits of new Chris, right? She's going to get
yeah,
Chris 2.5 and 2.5 made over, and she's going, "Oh, my daddy was the best thing in all my world." And your boys are going to be like, "Well, it wasn't always like that." So
yeah,
that'll probably come up at Thanksgiving dinner in about 7 years. Let's put, yeah, maybe a little longer. Let's go 10 years. So
yeah,
but I think if you just keep that attitude you have to where you have the ability to smile and laugh and hug your way through that moment, man, it'll be a really cool moment for just the recognition. So, um, dude, I appreciate it. I appreciate you taking time to make the world a better place by just sharing your story about this stuff. And we all about breaking curses with the Second Chance podcast. I preach that all the time. You feel like you got that dark cloud over you. You feel like you've are in that bad space, and it's stories like yours that helps people realize that, man, it's easy to break that curse if you'll just find that positivity, find the right group, find the right people to be around, man, and focusing on what builds you up and what is good to you, like your family, man. So I appreciate it, and I will plan our conversation for our next one. Does that sound good?
yes, sir.
All right, man.